My name is Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Duff. You do not need, I don't need this microphone, but I don't think you all will like be me yelling at you for the next 20 minutes. You'll be like, when did I enlist and how did I end up in boot camp? All right, I served 20 years on active duty. My primary occupational specialty was motor transport. I was a tractor-trailer driver. I hauled for the infantry and wing units. And every time I pulled up, they looked at me like, you're kidding, you're hauling my stuff? Yes, I am. Get on board. I can honestly say that the previous speaker was very moving, but I'm going to be a lot more blunt than him. I'm going to be very candid, and I'm going to probably tick a few of you off, particularly if you voted for the previous administration. So, I'm also going to make a few cheap shots at a few generals, so if any of you are 4 stars, I apologize in advance, but I hold nothing back. Okay? Now that we're clear. Our military readiness is down to a horrible rate. From 2011 to 2014, we lost $100 billion in our defense budget. That means half of our equipment is incapable of even operating in combat. We cannot even address 2 wars on 2 separate fronts. So meanwhile, and this is very well-known knowledge, this isn't anything classified, 70% of the Marine Corps FA-18s cannot fly in combat. 60% of the United States Navy FA-18s cannot fly in combat. 3 of 50 combat brigades in the United States Army are only capable of going to combat. 3 of 50. Gotta cheat. Oh, 55. And I didn't want to forget the Air Force, I apologize. The Air Force, 55 fighter squadrons of 134 are capable of operating in combat. This is real. You cannot take out of sequestration $100 billion out of the Pentagon and expect it's not going to hurt, because it has. The forces were depleted, the equipment was depleted, let alone the morale was depleted. It's very serious. My biggest issue is those generals didn't stand up to President Obama and stop it. Right. That's where I am pissed off. Those generals sat back and watched as they put women in ground combat as of, I'm sorry, no more combat exemption, ladies. If you've got granddaughters and they go in the military, they can be involuntarily assigned now to ground combat. On April 15th, tax day, 2016, combat exemption was removed for women. And I don't think the United States even noticed. Meanwhile, we put on this false parade of Army women that were going through, what was that training? No. Ranger school. That's not even really Ranger school. It's a leadership school that they went through. So that was a false narrative that they went through actual Ranger school to become Rangers. They didn't go through the Ranger Training Battalion. They went through a leadership school where they earned the tab. Every one of those women had to be recycled through each phase twice. First phase, twice. Second phase, twice. Third phase, twice. One of the females, the third one that wasn't glorified on CNN and MSNBC and all the other liberal networks, had to go through 3 times before she graduated. No male would have been allowed to do that. Let's stop saying, well, if she wants to, let her. Because I'm going to tell you what that causes. Death. It's going to cause lethal mistakes. Women have roughly 40 to 45% less muscle mass than men. We have roughly 20% less lung capacity than men. No way around it. You can go to the gym, you can work out, but because we have 10 times less of the testosterone than men, you start breaking before you start building. That's why women have higher rates of sports injuries. Our combat readiness, not only is our combat readiness depleted, because of the previous administration and combat exemption was lifted for women, all of the branches of service have been pushed to put women in the combat jobs. For the Marine Corps, that would roughly cost over $2 million a year just in recruiting alone. I am not against women. My God, I was a Marine for 20 years, okay? I hauled in one of the big boys' fields. I hung around men. I learned to cuss like you cannot believe. I will spare you. I don't do it on TV either. But with that said, I'm not stupid. I was on the ground, and I've debated multiple women who have fought for this. One is Martha McSally out of Arizona. She was a fighter pilot during Desert Storm, and her claim to fame is, I was the first female to fly in combat. Big freaking deal. How many other women were right behind you? Oh, you took off first? I'm sorry. I don't want to hear about the first anything. How about the best? How about being number one? That's what I want to hear about. She tries to tell us about all the other skills women offer. We offer integrity. We offer intelligence. I'm sorry, when ISIS is going hand-to-hand combat whooping my ass, they don't care how honest I was or how fast I can run. Because that's what combat is. Ground combat is hand-to-hand combat. Women aren't even in the NFL. If we're so equal, how is it that we don't have some strong safety female running, and clobbering down a wide receiver? Well, let's just turn this around the other way. You're a female wide receiver, and you think you're hauling some rear. You're going, and then here comes a strong safety who weighs 215 pounds, blowing you across the field. That's combat. That's combat. The Marine Corps decided to fight the Obama administration. I will dare say the Marine Corps was the only branch of service that said they were trying to get exemption from the ground combat. And they spent $30 million trying to prove it. And still acquiesced. In their study for 9 months out in 29 Palms, California, women performed, the integrated units, male and female, performed only at 69% of the rate as the non-integrated units. We wouldn't even buy a truck that performs at 69% of the rate of another vehicle. Why would you have a unit that's immediately depreciated its capability? And so, Secretary Ash Carter at that time decides in his wisdom to say, well, you didn't pick the best women for this, like you set it up for failure. One of the female sergeants, I admire her immensely, spoke to the press. She says, what are you talking about? We were the best they had. We are the ones that got through infantry training battalion. My God, these were already Marines. They weren't some little girls that they just pulled out of high school and threw out there. These were women that had already gone through boot camp, Marine combat training, infantry training battalion. And yet they still could not compete with men. The average female compared to the average male is never going to be the same. It's called biology. We are setting women up for failure. I dare to say women like me will soon become obsolete if they keep on this track. The physical fitness standards in the Marine Corps have increased, whereas in the Army, they've tried to lower those standards so that they could integrate the women. Well, you know what that means? They don't call it lowering either. They call it non-gender standards. Non-gender. So the girls can do it too. You know what that means? Lower standards. Because the females that get in means that a lower standard male gets in too. And now you have a lower performing unit. Women have almost 10 times the injury rate of males. 10 times. You're talking spinal compression, muscle atrophy, hip displacement. We're not designed the same. And when you have that high rate of injury, I dare to say I'd love to see the VA release the data on what the percentage of women are that have been discharged with medical injury that's paid for by the taxpayers till the day they die, compared to men. And the guys always say, well, guys get hurt too. Of course they do. But when almost 38 to 40% of your women can't lift an object that 1%, only 1% of the males cannot lift, you've got a problem. The Marine Corps sent 400 women to infantry training battalion in this little study that cost all of you a whole lot of money. 400 women, only 35% graduated, compared to only 2% of the males that could not graduate. My question to the United States Marine Corps is, what happened to the other 65%? How many of them ended up sustaining injury that impacted them and they had to be discharged? That's irresponsible. Oh, but they wanted to. Really? You have a responsibility of not shoveling people through at 400 just to get one. They finally got a female through Marine Infantry Officers course after close to 30 of them never graduated. Many of us are suspicious at how she got through. Many of us. That she received assistance because the Marine Corps has been so pressured to show inclusiveness. I dare to tell you, Al-Qaeda does not care how inclusive we are. You're talking about the most lethal job in the world. The Marine Corps has to deploy within 72 hours. No other branch of service is capable of doing that. And attacking in land assault. I've been on enough humps. Even though I was motor transport, I always had a commanding officer who wishes he was the infantry. Always! It's the most competitive field to get into. It's the most prestigious. So what would they do? Park the trucks. You're going to load up with some gear. Over 120 pounds worth of gear. And I would go on 10 to 12 mile humps. And I'm not going to say I was good at it. I'm not going to lie. I barely held on. Every single time. I had to outsmart them and become like the guide and get in the front. Because if I was in a platoon, and anybody who served in the military, you know that you've got multiple platoons. If you're in the last platoon, you're doing seesaw the whole way, and you're running to catch up. I'm not built like that. And I'm strong. I'm the bigger one of the girls. Most of them are little. I'm 5'8", and in my heels I'm 6'2" to scare away the little guys, okay? Just letting you know. But the women that are usually really good with upper body strength are usually smaller. But they're not carrying something that's almost their body weight. I know a female Marine, 29 years old, that needed 2 hips replaced from carrying those loads. I'm going to tell you, as God is my witness, though probably the only way that I survived was He knew He had a plan for me when I got out. So that I could go on national television and advocate for the military and make a statement. Less than 6% of the Marines were female when I was on active duty. 6%. Out of that, across the board military, roughly 17% make it to retirement. 17% of that 6% is 0.05. I'm 0.05. That's a miracle. No, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. I mean that. I knew a lot of women just as tough, if not tougher, stronger. Something in me just kept me going. And I truly do believe it's so I could do what I do today. So I'm going to just run through some stuff right now. Heritage Foundation came out with a study that our military readiness is so bad that the Navy, Air Force, and our U.S. nuclear capabilities were rated as marginal. The Army and Marines are rated as weak. This study just came out 4 weeks ago. General Dunford, who's now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, had to testify in Congress on that, and he did not dispute it. I have never heard the Marine Corps called weak, and that tells you how bad it is, because the Corps will kill itself to save this country, as many of them have. The average man to the average woman, as I had mentioned, the males have 10 times more androgenic hormones. The excess exercise for the women lowers their estrogen rates. That increases injury. So if anybody has granddaughters and daughters or play soccer, you notice they have a higher injury rate than the males. If we were so equal, we would be in the Olympics with men. Sports medicine has been trying to get these women to be the same as males because you know the tougher they are, the better they can perform in the Olympics. So now you got the transgenders or men who want to be women, and now they are competing in our fields. And I honestly wonder if that's what the military was doing when they were going to let transgenders in. So the women who will be in the infantry used to be men. Okay, that makes sense. I can see this. Somebody asked about General Mattis. I'm not going to pull any punches here. General Mattis should have walked in and said no to transgenders and women in ground combat the day he got in office. Why hasn't he? Why is he reviewing the transgender issue? They've already known. You can't come into the military with eczema. You can't come in with flat feet, high blood pressure, insulin. I'm sorry, but now you're going to get hormone therapy and you get to live like a girl for a whole year to see if you like it before we change you over. And the women in the Army were being told that they were going to have to take showers with the men because they are transitioning. Thank God for President Trump. My goodness. Like, what the heck? These politicians, generals, have become politicians and they're so worried about upsetting the liberals. And many of them, don't fool yourselves, are tied to liberals in a heavy way. Do not think that they're conservative. They're Obama generals. How'd they get promoted? How did they hit the 4 stars? How'd they hit the 3 stars? How'd they hit the 2? Because President Trump probably hasn't signed too many of those warrants yet. Think about it. You couldn't even stand up to the commander-in-chief and say, I'm sorry, women in ground combat is a lethal mistake. You're going to kill them and you're going to kill the men. The study by the Marine Corps came out and unequivocally stated that, and we still have women in ground combat. So here's how it's going to work, ladies and gentlemen. There's no such thing as choice. It's going to increase the standards for all women because they're going to all have to be eligible for the infantry the way the males are. We don't let people in who can't run, who can't do pull-ups, who can't do sit-ups. You don't get to come in, oh, well, you could do a desk job, it's okay. No, it doesn't work like that. A lot of people think I was public affairs because I go on television. No, I hauled tractor trailers, commercial rigs, and that was hard enough. Massive upper body strength, and by the way, this is before they became automatics. There were 13-speed, high-low transfer, 48-foot trailers. I had to chain down those loads. But in order to enlist now, the females now are going to have to come to the same minimum standard as the males. But guess what? People say, well, if she passes the training, training's every day, people. Training goes for 4 years, 8 years, 12 years. I don't care you get through a class. Everybody can get through the school. Not everybody, but many can. But now you've got to look at the long-term impact. So we got 2 problems right now. Our military readiness has been depreciated, and meanwhile the Pentagon was mucking around with transgenders and putting women in ground combat. Obviously, the priorities are upside down. This situation with North Korea, we better pray it doesn't happen. Seoul is 36 miles from the border. Kim Jong-un has one objective, and that's to reunite with South Korea, to reunite that entire peninsula. People think he's crazy. Oh no, he's not crazy. This is strategic. His father was tied to the Soviet Union or Russia, and his grandfather was tied with the Soviet Union before it became Russia. They had nuclear protection with Russia. They want nuclear weapons for one reason. It's called an insurance policy. Because we killed Osama bin Laden, he didn't have a nuke. We went after Muammar Gaddafi, he didn't have a nuke. Once this man has nuclear capability, he sees it in his mind as a insurance policy. They have merchandised their weapons. They make roughly, it's estimated, $3 billion a year from Iran. Chemical weapons were found in Syria that had come from North Korea. Okay? The nuclear reactor that was built in Syria, that was taken out by the Israelis in 2007, was from North Korea. They've merchandised it. That's why it's so hard to have sanctions on North Korea, because they've got all of this underground money. The best thing President Trump did was he went after sanctions against the Bank of China. Because when you cut off the funds there, Bank of China was told, if you do business with North Korea, we're cutting you off. And they would collapse if we no longer did business with them. And we told the rest of the world, we'll cut you off too. But we can't even sustain ourselves There's 2,500 troops, 25,000 troops in South Korea. Our men and women. They're there to protect South Korea. But if we can't sustain long-term combat, how will we survive? This is very serious. Don't get so caught up that President Trump won, all problems are solved, because they're not. He has a lot of people in this administration that don't have, as we would say, cojones, to do what is right. They're not doing what is right. He is, but he gets persuaded by all these people who came from this Obama era, and then it starts making him think, what should we be doing? Afghanistan speech. Listen to his speech. That wasn't President Trump campaigning. Talking about going into, how are we going to beat this? What's the new plan? We're talking about how many more troops going in there. How many more men got to die? We're not supposed to be a nation building. You can't do that. Taliban is tribal. It's not national. They don't stand up for their national anthem. Do they even have one? With that said, we have to keep the foot on the gas. We got to reverse these policies that have been in place. We have to increase our military readiness. They have requested $600 billion for the Pentagon, and people think that's a horrific amount. I might remind you, between 2011 and 2014, we lost $100 billion. And when only 70% of your FA-18s can fly in combat, and only 3 of your 50 combat brigades can go to combat in the Army, you've got a problem. In 2009, I helped pass a law that's called the MOVE Act. I testified in front of Congress on how difficult it was for us to get our ballots on time. The law was allowing states to send their ballots out sometimes 30 days, 2 weeks before the election to people based overseas. How insane is that? Because they're postponing their elections all the way to the last minute. And then when they figured out who the general election candidates were, then they were getting mailed overseas. Active duty military doesn't even have the same motor voter laws like you have out here, where you can walk into the DMV and get registered to vote. You could go to Safeway probably and get registered to vote out here. You could go to the welfare line, obviously, and get registered to vote. Any local location, you could get registered to vote. But the active duty military, less than 5% of our active duty was ever voting. So I testified on what it's like. And then people were trying to say, well, we'll make it electronic. Pentagon to this day is not compliant with the MOVE Act that I helped pass in 2009. Not compliant. The Pentagon is sometimes your worst set of you-know-whats. They're careerists. They've been there forever. Yes, and they don't get, so what they did is they made an online system. I'm sorry, I was motor transport, I was in the field. The United States Marine Corps Infantry is in the field. We are not hopping around with our laptop. What is wrong with you people? What, do you want just the Air Force to vote? I'm sorry, Air Force, I'm going to need to say that. Hey, but it's true. If you are in the infantry, you are not walking around and doing any downloading your ballot. I'm against electronic voting. That's how you have hackers, and every time they've done electronic voting, hackers have gotten in, and that's how foreign agents can alter your election, or also known as the Clintons. So thank you for asking me about that. I plan on trying to still pursue it under the Trump administration. Several of my friends are part of the voting commission, and they have found that 5,000 illegal votes that were cast in Massachusetts. They found out that more registered people in Los Angeles than eligible to vote. There's a lot of illegal voting going on. And I'm trying to discuss with them about getting the military back on board, because you're right, active duty military is the most disenfranchised group of all U.S. citizens.
CNN would have to disagree with you.
Of course. Yes, sir.
You brought out about Iran doing $3 billion a year.
To North Korea, yes.
Korea. But you need to also bring out in your speech that it just didn't start, because years ago, when Israel withdrew the IDF from southern Lebanon, Iran and Syria bought all of its missiles that they gave Hezbollah in southern Lebanon from North Korea.
Yes, sir.
These are not the homemade missiles from Gaza. These are with guidance we don't know, maybe with, could be some biological or even chemical warheads on them.
Yes.
But billions of dollars, and this past administration, and many of the people's senators, my congresswoman in Aventura is Debbie Washburn Shaw, and Bill Nelson voted to give $150 billion to Iran, knowing that
Yes,
they're
paddles of
buying
cash.
these missiles from North Korea.
Yes.
And that money is going to be going to help
Absolutely.
this crackpot in North
Yes, $150 billion in the pallets of cash. However, I wasn't really focused on North Korea. I just wanted to give the little tidbit there that they merchandise their weapons. Of course, it's been going on for a long time. In 1983, 247 Marines and fellow service members were killed by Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. That was right before I was born, and that's a lie. But I'm not going to, that's a lie. I don't tell people how old I am. However, the Iranians have been killing us for a long time. And when people say that money was theirs, I say no, it goes to the victims of terrorism. They're the largest state-sponsored terrorism in the world. That cash was not theirs. It was the victims, because that was that was under the Shah of Iran that money had happened. And then you've got all these mullahs now mullahing in it. So yes. Any other question? I don't want to take any more time. Yes. Yes, sir.
I thought your presentation was superb.
Thank you.
I just wanted to sort of make a comment or an additional thought, especially on the parts where you're talking about the lack of wisdom in terms of putting women in combat roles.
Ground combat.
Yeah, it usually seems to me that the discussion is always talking about the physical differences between men and women. But an argument that is always neglected, it seems perhaps the most important one, is the different perceptions that our society, that all societies through history have had about women and men in terms of the ability to sacrifice them. Historically, in every war, if women are at risk, that's usually when they surrender, because they're the most precious part of the society. Even though our elites in Washington and all the rest see no difference between women and men and women and the radical feminists in so-called flyover America, where we still have traditional values and think of women and men in these traditional values, I can't think of a situation that would more rapidly lead us to give up a war if we ended up losing large numbers of women, in a serious big war again, or if they captured women prisoners and started torturing them on television. If we thought the effects of putting the war on television in Vietnam were demoralizing, imagine what the effects of that would be in some future conflict. It just seems to me that there is no common sense at all in this idea about putting women in combat roles, and in terms of the effect that's going to have.
So the reason I don't go into those areas, because you're never going to win on an emotional argument. You're never going to win. You better have facts. Because I've heard people talk about women's menstrual periods as a reason. I'm like, okay, come on. I did 20 years on active duty. We managed this, okay? Come on. Emotional arguments are real, but I can't win a debate on an emotional argument. A feminist or a liberal who supports women fighting in ground combat will beat me every time. Because there are women like me who did do 20 years, and trust me, those guys probably did want me to die sometimes, because I was in their ass all the time. I mean, really, there's tough women on active duty. They're not wallflowers, okay? However, you can win on the facts. 40% less muscle mass, 20% less lung capacity, almost 10 times the rate of injury. That is undisputed. We have empirical data that shows that women will break down faster. And if they would use that study by the Marine Corps, they have the valid argument to lift this, but they don't even want that study to be reviewed.
20 years in the Marine Corps. She enlisted when she was 9.
That's it. Yes, sir.
Question, how do the Israelis use women in the army?
They don't use women in ground combat. They haven't. That's a myth. They did temporarily at one point, and they found that there was high rates of death, and it was not sustainable. The women that are in the Israeli army also only have to enlist for 2 years. They're drafted. If they're pregnant, they don't have to serve. If they're married, if there's certain religious restrictions, there is massive leeway for the Israeli women. It's a myth. They are not on the front lines. They go do guard duty. I did guard duty. They're guard duty on very safe borders, such as Jordan, where there's no combat threat. That is a myth. The other myth, when I hear people talk about, well, look at the Kurdish women. Kurdish women are like American women. If you want to come attack my house, I will kill you. That has nothing to do with it, because those Kurdish women do not deploy with the United States Marine Corps, the United States Navy, and get on those ships and go into submarines and fight in ground combat, or go through infantry training school, or go through Marine Corps boot camp. They're doing it because they have no choice. That doesn't make us equal just because you hand females weapons, because hand-to-hand combat happened in Fallujah, and a lot of men died by a knife. Anybody who's got a weapon knows sometimes you can't even you run out of ammo. You can't grab your weapon fast enough. If you got an M16 and not a 9mm, M16 sticks out to here. I'm sorry, Al-Qaeda's in my face. I gotta grab my K-bar and I gotta stab them. Women can't even equally defend themselves. We don't even fight in the MMA with men. Let me break this down. We're not in the NFL, we're not in the NBA, we don't do MMA. We don't even compete with men in golf. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
There's been a lot of talk about women complaining they've been having to put up with sexual abuse, and the Army looking and the armed forces looking the other way. And I'd like a comment on that.
I never experienced it because I'm
sure you
mean.
did not.
I'm mean. You learn, I can't speak for what other women have gone through, but I'm going to just say, women often in active duty, and this is a problem, go unprepared. They don't have good leadership and they don't have good mentors. Women who went on the submarines without any senior staff NCOs, such as myself, had high pregnancy rates, had high assault rates. You cannot stick, this is another reason women cannot go into the infantry, because you have no senior leadership female that can mentor them. But they're trying to inadvertently place people like me, gunnery sergeants, in an infantry unit. And all that's going to do is create resentment because I didn't go through the same training as the men. Sexual assault's going to happen in life, and it happens on college campuses, and I don't think it's any worse on a college campus when kids go out and drink all night, and often it's alcohol related. Don't let it fool you. Have you ever had a friend in your life who was always the victim? Always. Okay. I'm not saying sexual assault doesn't happen under legitimate conditions, but the Army has to get cracking down on teaching how to have buddy programs, how to ensure that you are not drinking, you are not hanging out late at night. And people say, well, it's not the female's fault. You're absolutely right. I was an equal opportunity advisor at the largest operational command in the Marine Corps. I'm not going to do victim focus. But everybody has a responsibility. And when you have poor leadership that is ignoring it, that's the problem. And often the leadership is male. But is it rampant? I would dispute that. I would dispute that. But you always are going to hear about the people it happened to. I would not say it doesn't happen. But you have got to learn to say no immediately. You have to learn to say F off pretty damn fast, and you won't have problems. Not always. I don't want to speak for everybody. There may be women who have experienced this. But being in the military, you got to carry yourself differently. You must. I want men who can go kill the enemy. I don't want soft guys. An aggressive personality is imperative to succeed in the military. You cannot let yourself get run over. Yes, sir.
Sergeant Duff, thank you.
Gunnery Sergeant. You just demoted me 2 ranks. Go ahead.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome, sir.
Do you have any upcoming appearances scheduled that we can let everybody know?
I'm usually, if you follow Twitter, I'll announce I'm at Jessie Jane Duff on Twitter, and they book me usually the day of. So, like today I had to tell New York that I was going to be in Boca Raton. I said, but if you need me, you can find a studio. And they're like, no, we don't. So I usually film, they just come up when they come up. Usually at least once a week on Fox Business, sometimes twice, and now and then inadvertently I'll be on Fox News.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I know your opinion on General Mathis didn't seem very high, but what do you think of him as Secretary of Defense?
No, I think he was a phenomenal general.
Okay.
I'm not overwhelmed as Secretary of Defense. He was a phenomenal general. Don't get me wrong. And I really get nervous when I speak publicly because I've seen people take my words so way out of context and say she said this, she said that, but they missed the context of what it said. He's a Marine. I admire him to death, but why didn't he walk in and remove women from ground combat and transgenders day one? That upsets me. He knows better than anybody, but even when he testified, he said comments that he had no concern as long as people could do the job. He gave the milquetoast generic lefty answer. And he probably wouldn't have gotten confirmed had he not. Senator Gillibrand would try to stop him. I think we've got everybody. Oh, one last question. Yes, ma'am.
General McMaster.
I hate him. I'm sorry, did I say that? Claire's gonna shoot me. I'm sorry. I'm a gunnery sergeant. We don't have a very good filter. Not impressed. Not impressed. Not impressed. He's the one that says terrorism isn't associated with Islam. I'm sorry, that's not true. That is a lie. I could go on and on. The reason that we have been waffling on this the Iran deal. Oh, he got him to not certify, but he didn't get the president to withdraw. That should have never happened. It should never happen without going through Congress and Senate. I could go on and on about fire McMaster. That concludes my presentation. Are we all motivated still?
May I interject? I am so motivated that my 2 cents, I'm going to get down and give you 22 before you were arrested. Let's go.
Hey, everybody stand up! Everybody stand up! If you can, stand up! 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20! We're going to make this real fast. You're going to clap. When I sing motivation, I'm going to put the mic out. You're going to say motivation. When I say dedication, I'm going to put the mic out and you're going to sing dedication. We're going to do what's called cadence. But you're not going to have to run. Don't worry. I'm going to let you cheat and stand still. But just pretend you're running. This is what we do as Marines. We run and sing. Let me tell you, it's not easy either. So here we go. Come on, clap. And when I'm going to say motivation, then you're going to say it.